Welcome to this deep dive into Sally Rooney's Beautiful World, Where Are You? We've got some fascinating stuff. You sent us excerpts from the book, background on Rooney herself, even her acknowledgments. You're clearly looking for more than just like a basic understanding of this book.
Well, what's so intriguing about Beautiful World, Where Are You? Is that it goes beyond a typical love story. It really digs into those anxieties of like a whole generation, mirroring those struggles many young people face today. Love, work, the state of the world, even faith. All these anxieties kind of woven into the lives of these four main characters: Alice, Eileen, Simon, and Felix.
Yeah, so we have Alice, the successful novelist, but she almost seems disillusioned with her own success, like it's a burden to her. And then there's Eileen, her best friend. She's working a more normal kind of job and trying to figure out all the complexities of love and relationships. And then there's Simon. He's this intriguing character linked to both women, deeply involved in politics, but also, wrestling with his own internal struggles. And lastly, we have Felix, this warehouse worker, coming from a completely different world than Alice. Such a stark contrast to her life of, literary fame.
It's interesting, right off the bat, Rooney has Alice making this, what seems like an impulsive move to a house by the sea. She tells Felix it was spontaneous, but it feels like she's running from something, don't you think?
Totally. Rooney's really masterful at this, leaving things unsaid, creating this tension beneath the surface. It's not just about what happens, the plot, but about those unspoken anxieties that are driving these characters. Alice's discomfort with her success, her questioning of her place in the world, it's so palpable.
One scene that really hit me was Alice's experience in that convenience store. She describes this overwhelming feeling of emptiness, this awareness of global inequality, almost like an existential crisis, but triggered by, a rows of snacks. That scene, it's pivotal, I think, for understanding Alice's anxieties. It's more than just about consumerism. It's that realization that her comfortable life is built on a system that perpetuates suffering. That feeling of living in a television show, detached from reality. That speaks to a bigger anxiety that a lot of young people grapple with, that awareness of global issues, climate change, social justice, but feeling powerless to change anything.
It definitely makes you think,
Yes.
about what even is success and happiness in a world with such huge problems.
Exactly. And this is where Rooney's exploration of Alice's disillusionment with the literary world gets so interesting. She sees herself as a worst culprit, for contributing to this narrative that distracts from the real problems humanity faces. Her success just feels meaningless when you look at all the suffering in the world.
Then we have Eileen, who's dealing with these more everyday anxieties, her job, her relationships, especially this complex connection with Simon. Their interactions full of intensity, but also so much miscommunication, so much struggle.
And what's fascinating about their relationship is that it reflects, the anxieties surrounding love and commitment in our world, which is constantly changing. Social norms are shifting, making it harder to define relationships, to navigate those emotional needs. Eileen and Simon's constant push and pull, it really embodies that uncertainty.
And it's not just the romantic relationships that are complicated. Eileen's relationship with her family, especially with her sister Lola, it adds another layer of tension, right? There's this underlying competition and all those societal expectations, and it seems to feed their individual anxieties.
Family dynamics, they play such a huge role in shaping these anxieties. It's clear that Eileen feels the weight of those expectations, especially as Lola's wedding gets closer. It triggers this feeling of inadequacy, the sense of not measuring up to those external pressures.
And then there's Simon, who stands out with his devout Catholicism. Such a contrast to Alice's atheism and even Eileen's kind of conflicted feelings about religion.
It's interesting how their different views on faith actually become like a microcosm, I guess, of the broader anxieties around spirituality in our secular world. Brings up that question, what do we believe in when we don't have those traditional religious frameworks anymore? Do we find meaning in love, in our work, in something else entirely?
It's like Rooney's highlighting this universal need, like a human need, for something to believe in, something to ground us in a world that feels chaotic, uncertain.
That's such a great point. And the novel doesn't shy away from these darker, more unsettling parts of searching for meaning, for a purpose. It acknowledges the pain, the confusion, those moments of feeling completely lost. We've been talking about how Beautiful World, Where Are You? Really captures the anxieties of this generation, right? And now I think it's time to look closer at the relationships in the book. They really bring these anxieties to life. Take Alice and Felix, for instance. Their connection seems to highlight the class divides in modern society.
It is fascinating, yeah. You have Alice, this acclaimed novelist, living in this world of intellectualism, literary acclaim. And then you have Felix. He's a warehouse worker, very grounded in the physicality of his work. They come from totally different worlds.
It's more than just their jobs, too, right? It's their backgrounds shaping their whole perspective on life. Alice is grappling with her privilege, that feeling of being watched, judged for her success, while Felix seems more connected to the everyday realities of his life.
There's that scene at the party, remember, where Felix's friend finds Alice's Wikipedia page. You can feel the whole mood shift. Alice tries to downplay her fame, almost embarrassed by it. And Felix, well, he seems to kind of resent it. He calls her weird.
That scene, perfect example of the power imbalance between them. Alice knows she's special, but she's uncomfortable with it. And Felix, even though he's drawn to her, he struggles with that same awareness. Creates this underlying tension, even resentment, I think.
But I don't know, it seems like Felix is the one who was uncomfortable with it, right? Not Alice. She seems to hate all that attention.
You're right. That's what's so brilliant about Rooney, those subtle complexities. They're attracted to each other for the very things that cause tension. Alice wants that simplicity from Felix, that connection to a world she feels so detached from. And Felix, he's attracted to her intellect, her success, even though it makes him feel less than.
So they're both looking for an escape in each other. Alice from all the pressures of fame, and Felix from this, perceived monotony of his own life.
Exactly, and that escape, it comes out most strongly in their physical relationship. Rooney describes it with such raw intensity, almost primal. It highlights this need to connect on this purely physical level.
Yeah, like they find this temporary refuge in each other's bodies, a way to quiet all those anxieties of their everyday lives.
And yet, even in those intimate moments, there's this distance, a disconnect. They just can't communicate, be vulnerable with each other. Their conversations, they're so stilted, full of these awkward silences and all that unspoken tension.
It's like they speak different languages. Alice overthinks everything, overanalyzes her emotions. And Felix, even though he seems confident, he's guarded, hesitant to really express how he feels.
And because they can't truly open up, this gap just keeps growing. Remember that huge fight when Eileen finds porn on Felix's computer? Exposes this fundamental clash in their worldviews.
Ugh, that scene was so raw.
Yeah.
So uncomfortable. Eileen accuses Felix of being desensitized to, the exploitation of women. And Felix, he accuses her of being judgmental, morally superior.
It's like this head-on collision of values. Two totally different ways of seeing the world, and it shows how hard it is to bridge that gap, even when there's this intense physical attraction.
They both have a point, but they can't see it from the other side. It's like they're trapped, each in their own little world, and they can't truly hear what the other is saying.
The trip to Rome, that becomes a turning point, exposes the limits of trying to escape physically. Even with all the beauty and history, of this foreign city, those internal struggles come back. All their anxieties about their lives back home.
They realize no matter where you go, you can't outrun yourself. You can't outrun your own internal conflicts.
This is especially true for Alice. The trip forces her to face her own hypocrisy. That gap between her beliefs and how she actually lives. Remember that email she sends Eileen where she calls herself the worst culprit?
That part was just heartbreaking. She feels so guilty about her success, knowing it's built on a system she finds morally wrong.
And that guilt spills over into her relationship with Felix. He represents this world she romanticizes, but also judges. She's attracted to that simplicity, that lack of pretense, but she can't escape feeling superior.
It's tragic, really. She's stuck. Can't fully embrace him because she feels like she has all these advantages, intellectually and socially, but she can't reject him either because she wants that authenticity he has.
And in the end, it all falls apart, right? In this drunken fight, Felix accuses Alice of being emotionally unavailable.
Which is true, don't you think? She pushes him away because she's scared to let him really see her.
Absolutely. Alice is all about this fear of intimacy. It's a big theme in Rooney's work. She builds up all these walls, intellectually, emotionally, like a defense mechanism.
Like she's sabotaging the relationship before it can even really begin. Is Rooney saying something about how hard it is to connect genuinely in our world? Like we're so disconnected from each other, even from ourselves.
You've hit on something important there, I think. Alice and Felix, their relationship is like a warning. It's about the dangers of looking for external validation instead of internal fulfillment.
And it brings up these really important questions about privilege in relationships. Can you really have true intimacy when the power dynamic is so unbalanced? Can you connect with someone from a different world, someone who challenges your own experiences?
Those are the questions Rooney leaves us with, and that's what makes her writing so powerful. No easy answers, just these complex, flawed characters. It's like a reflection of how messy human connection really is.
Speaking of messy relationships, let's talk about Eileen and Simon. Their connection seems less about those external differences and more about this deep emotional entanglement, that push and pull that's been going on for years.
Their dynamic is so interesting because it goes way back, all the way to their teenage years. They have this shared history, and it creates a deep familiarity, this bond that pulls them together, but also fuels their anxieties.
It's like their past is this thread that's always connecting them, even when they try to move on. We've been talking about all these complicated relationships in Beautiful World, Where Are You? And Eileen and Simon's connection feels, I don't know, really heavy. It's not just about like anxieties they're facing now. It's that whole shared past, right? All those years of like unspoken feelings and missed chances.
Yeah, and what's so interesting is that their dynamic is rooted in this long history. I mean, it goes all the way back to when they were teenagers. And that creates a real sense of familiarity, a bond. It draws them together, but it also kind of feeds their anxieties, you know?
And then, boom, Alice drops that bomb. She reveals that Simon has had feelings for Eileen for years. Talk about a twist. It forces Eileen to face her own feelings, those emotions she's been pushing down. Like, was she really clueless this whole time?
That's the turning point. It exposes the foundation of their whole relationship. It's all these years of unspoken desires and missed connections and what ifs, and it creates this palpable tension, this feeling that something's got to give.
They're like dancing around each other.
Yeah.
Getting close, but never fully committing.
Yeah.
Like they're both scared to mess things up, afraid of getting hurt if they actually let go.
And that fear is even bigger because of their own issues. Eileen struggles with self-doubt. She feels inadequate, personally and professionally. And Simon, even though he seems so charismatic and successful, you get the sense he's carrying a lot of emotional baggage.
Yeah, like in that scene where he talks about his dad. His father says that Simon's political activism is just a messiah complex, implying Simon needs to control everything, be in charge. That's gotta sting, right?
It's a brutal comment, and it shows how much our parents affect us, even as adults. That kind of makes you wonder if Simon's need to be needed to save people comes from wanting his dad's approval, trying to prove himself.
Like he's trying to fill some void inside himself by fixing everyone else's problems.
It's interesting, right, that tendency can be good and bad. It can lead to real kindness, but it can also create unhealthy relationships. Blurred lines.
And that's what happens with Eileen, I think. He's drawn to her vulnerability, her need for someone to lean on. And she's attracted to his strength, how he takes care of her. But that dynamic can be suffocating. It stops them from being equals.
It turns into this dance of codependency, each of them playing a specific role in the other person's emotional story. But real intimacy, that needs more than just meeting needs. It takes vulnerability, honesty, the courage to face your own flaws.
And then there's Caroline, Simon getting involved with another woman when he clearly still has feelings for Eileen. Talk about messy. It's a recipe for disaster.
Bringing Caroline in throws their whole connection into chaos. Eileen feels insecure, resentful. She has to face the fact that Simon just isn't emotionally available.
And the way Simon handles it just makes everything worse. He downplays his relationship with Caroline. He doesn't even acknowledge how hurt Eileen is, how angry.
He can't communicate, can't really see Eileen's pain or understand it, so they drift further apart. That pattern of avoiding his emotions, that fear of being vulnerable, it's been there since the beginning.
So they're stuck in this loop of hurting each other, not understanding each other, drawn to each other, but too scared to commit. Always looking for comfort and validation somewhere else instead of dealing with their own internal stuff.
Yeah. And with all that baggage, can they break free? Rooney doesn't really give us a clear answer. The book ends with them together at Alice's house, but there's no guarantee of a happy ending.
It's like she's saying, even with all their issues, all that past hurt and their current anxieties, there's still a chance for connection, for love.
Yeah.
But it's not going to be easy.
It's like a reminder. Relationships are complicated. Love is messy. There's no simple answer, no guidebook.
So what can we take away from this? As readers, I mean, we're dealing with our own relationship anxieties too, right? How can we learn from these characters? They're so flawed, but we connect with them.
One big thing, I think, is realizing we're not alone. The anxieties, the desires, that longing for connection, it's all relatable, right? Rooney shows us what love and relationships look like in our world, and she makes it okay.
It is kind of comforting to see our own struggles in these characters. Reminds us it's fine to be a little messy. to be confused, to screw up sometimes.
And the book pushes us to look inward, to be honest with ourselves about what we want, what we need. The characters are always questioning their choices, their motivations. It's not always fun, but it's how we grow.
Yeah, it encourages us to think about ourselves, ask those tough questions, even if the answers are hard to hear.
And even though there's all this darkness, all this uncertainty, the book still has hope. It says that connection is possible, even in a world that feels so broken and isolating. But you have to be vulnerable, let your guard down, really see the other person, even the parts that aren't perfect.
So, to everyone listening,
Yeah.
what does a beautiful world look like to you? Are you willing to put in the effort, to face your anxieties, open yourself up, to create that world inside yourself and with the people you love? Rooney doesn't give us all the answers, but her book gives us a lot to think about. It helps us understand each other, and it gives us hope.